Have you ever noticed how lighthouses always face the ocean, but the keepers never look out the windows after dark? My name is Claire Morrow. I'm a lighthouse keeper at Peggy's Cove in Nova Scotia. For the past 3 years, I've maintained one of Canada's most photographed landmarks, perched on granite rocks where the Atlantic crashes against the shore. My job is straightforward on paper: maintain the light, monitor weather conditions, assist with maritime safety, keep logs. Standard lighthouse keepers work at a site that sees thousands of tourists during summer, but becomes isolated and lonely once the crowds leave in fall. Most people think keeping a lighthouse is romantic, peaceful. They imagine me reading books while watching storms roll in. They don't know about the protocols, about the rules that aren't written in the official Canadian Coast Guard manual, about why every keeper who's worked here learns the same lesson within their first month. We never look at the sea at midnight. If you stay until the end, I'll tell you about those rules. Not the official ones about equipment maintenance and emergency procedures. The other rules. The ones passed down from keeper to keeper in quiet conversations and handwritten notes left in desk drawers. Rules about specific times when you keep your eyes away from the windows. About sounds you'll hear that you must never investigate. About why the observation deck is locked from sunset to sunrise. Because at Peggy's Cove, the lighthouse has stood for nearly 100 years, and in that time, 13 keepers have violated the protocols. 3 transferred immediately. 7 requested reassignment within weeks. 2 went missing. And one still works here, but she doesn't speak anymore. Just keeps the light running and follows the rules without question. I grew up in Halifax, 30 minutes from Peggy's Cove. My father was a marine biologist. My mother worked at the Maritime Museum. I spent my childhood around boats and docks and the smell of salt water. After university, where I studied maritime history and coastal management, I wanted work that connected me to the ocean. The Canadian Coast Guard was hiring auxiliary keepers for heritage lighthouses. Peggy's Cove needed someone. The location was perfect. Close to home. Beautiful setting. Good pay. The job posting mentioned it required someone comfortable with isolation and able to follow detailed protocols. But I figured that meant dealing with winter storms and maintaining equipment alone. I was only partially right. The lighthouse itself is iconic. Red and white tower. Octagonal concrete structure built in 1914. Sits on massive granite boulders that the Atlantic has been pounding for millions of years. During summer, tourists swarm the site, taking photos, climbing on rocks despite warnings. My job then is crowd management as much as lighthouse maintenance. But from October through April, the tourists disappear. The village nearby becomes quiet, and I'm alone in the keeper's quarters attached to the lighthouse, responsible for maintaining the beacon that warns ships away from one of the most dangerous stretches of coastline in Atlantic Canada. The quarters are small but comfortable. Kitchen, bedroom, office space, everything I need. Large windows facing the ocean. During the day, the view is spectacular. Endless Atlantic, granite shores, seabirds, fishing boats in the distance. But at night, those windows become something else. Something that every keeper learns to avoid looking through, especially at specific times. When I arrived in September, the outgoing keeper met me for a 2-week handover. Her name was Margaret. She'd worked at Peggy's Cove for 6 years. She looked tired, older than her 52 years. We spent the first week covering official procedures, equipment checks, weather monitoring, communication protocols, standard lighthouse keeper training. But during the second week, as summer ended and the tourist season closed, Margaret's demeanor changed. She became more serious, more direct. On my last day of training, she sat me down in the kitchen. The sun was setting. She closed all the curtains before speaking. "The official training covers how to maintain the lighthouse," she said. "But there are other things you need to know. Things that aren't in the manual. Things that will keep you safe if you follow them exactly." She pulled out a notebook. Handwritten. Worn pages. Every keeper adds to this. Goes back decades. It's not official, but it's more important than anything the Coast Guard taught you. She opened the first page. The entry was dated 1923, written by the lighthouse's second keeper. It said, "Rule 1. Never look at the ocean through the windows between midnight and 12:17 a.m. Keep curtains closed. Keep the lights inside dim. If you hear knocking on the glass during this time, do not respond. Do not investigate. Wait until 12:18, then you may look." I stared at Margaret. "Is this serious?" Her expression didn't change. "Every keeper who's ignored these rules has either left or disappeared. I'm still here because I follow them exactly. So will you if you're smart." She flipped through more pages. Rules written in different handwriting. Different decades. All specific. All strange. The protocols exist because of patterns we've observed over a century. Not superstition. Observation. Documentation. Things that happen here that don't happen at other lighthouses. Things connected to the sea and the rocks and something older than the lighthouse itself. What kind of things? Margaret closed the notebook. "You'll learn. Gradually. Everyone does. But for now, just follow the rules. Especially the midnight one. That's the most important. Something comes in from the ocean at midnight. Always at midnight. And it looks in the windows. If you're watching when it looks back." She trailed off. "Just don't. Keep the curtains closed. Keep busy with interior work. And after 12:17 you can look again. It'll be gone." "Gone where?" "I don't know. Back to the water. Back to wherever it comes from. But it only manifests during those 17 minutes. Every single night. Like clockwork. The tide doesn't explain it. The moon phase doesn't matter. Just happens. Has been happening since the lighthouse was built, according to the oldest entries." She left the next morning. The Coast Guard helicopter picked her up. She gave me her personal number. Said to call if I had questions. But she also said something else before boarding. "Most questions don't have answers here, Claire. Some things you just learn to live with. Learn to avoid it. The ocean is old. Older than we understand. And sometimes in certain places it shows us things we're not meant to see. Peggy's Cove is one of those places. The lighthouse was built here because ships needed warning about the rocks. But something else lives around these rocks. Something that was here long before the lighthouse. Long before humans settled this coast. It's been documented. It's been seen. And the only way to work here safely is to respect it. To follow the protocols. To never look at the sea at midnight." The helicopter lifted off. I watched it disappear toward Halifax. And I was alone. Alone with a lighthouse, a notebook full of rules, and an ocean that apparently did something at midnight that I wasn't supposed to witness. I wanted to dismiss it. Wanted to think Margaret had been isolated too long. That previous keepers had let superstition build into tradition. But I'd seen her face. I heard the tension in her voice. She wasn't joking. She wasn't exaggerating. She was giving me survival information the same way you'd teach someone not to touch hot stoves or walk on thin ice. That first night I followed the rule. Closed the curtains at 11:45 p.m. Keep the interior lights dim. Busied myself with logbook entries and equipment checks. At midnight I heard it. A sound, like something wet moving across granite. Getting closer. Then silence. Then 3 knocks on the window. Steady. Deliberate. Not wind, not branches. Knocking, like something was asking to be let in. I froze. Every instinct told me to look, to see what was there. But I remembered Margaret's warning. Rule 1. Never look at the ocean through the windows between midnight and 12:17 a.m. I stayed in the kitchen. I watched the clock. The knocking came again at 12:05, then at 12:11, then stopped. At 12:18 I opened the curtains. Nothing there. Just a dark ocean. Granite rocks. The beam from the lighthouse sweeping across the water. Normal. Empty. Like nothing had happened. But the windows were wet. Salt water running down the glass on the outside. And the granite below the window showed marks. Like something had dragged itself from the water up to the lighthouse. Marks that were gone by morning. Marks I found every night after that. Always appearing during those 17 minutes. Always disappearing by dawn. And that's how I learned. The rules weren't superstition. They were protocol. Documented procedures based on a century of observation. Things happened at this lighthouse. Things connected to the ocean and the midnight hour. Things that every keeper learned about one way or another. And the only way to keep working here, the only way to stay safe, was to follow the rules exactly. Never look at the sea at midnight. Never respond to the knocking. Never try to understand what leaves those marks on the granite. Just maintain the light. Do your job. And respect that some places on the Atlantic coast have been here much longer than we have. Places where the ocean still remembers things we've forgotten. Places where something comes ashore every night at midnight. And where the only thing protecting you is a closed curtain and the discipline to not look when every part of you wants to see what's really out there in the dark. Tomorrow night I'd follow the rule again. And the night after. And every night for as long as I worked here. 'Cause Margaret was right. Some things you learn to live with. Learn to avoid it. And the alternative, looking at the sea at midnight, was something I was never going to risk. Not after reading the notebook. Not after learning what happened to the keepers who didn't follow Rule 1. Because at Peggy's Cove, the ocean isn't just water and waves. Something else. Something old. Something that visits every night. And the lighthouse, despite standing here for a century, has never been able to keep it out. Only keep us from seeing it. And that difference between knowing it's there and seeing it directly is the difference between keeping your job and becoming another entry in the notebook. Another warning for the next keeper. Another proof that the rules exist for a reason. And that reason comes out of the Atlantic every single night at midnight, whether we're watching or not. The first 2 weeks passed in a routine. During the day, I maintained the lighthouse, checked the beacon, monitored weather, assisted the few tourists who still visited in early October. Normal work. But every night at 11:45 p.m., I closed the curtains, dimmed the lights, and waited. The knocking always came. 3 times during those 17 minutes. Sometimes at the windows facing the ocean. Sometimes at different windows. Once it came from the door leading to the observation deck. But I never looked. Never opened curtains. Never investigated. I followed Rule 1 exactly. On day 15 something changed. I was doing routine maintenance on the lamp room at the top of the lighthouse. It was 3 p.m. Clear day. Good visibility. I was replacing bulbs in the backup system when I noticed something in the water. About 200 meters offshore. Just beneath the surface. Something large. Dark. Moving parallel to the coastline. Not a whale. The shape was wrong. Too elongated. Too angular. It moved with purpose. Deliberately. And as I watched it surface briefly, just for a moment, long enough for me to see that it wasn't any marine animal I recognized, then it submerged and disappeared toward the north. I documented it in my personal log, not the official one, the notebook Margaret had left. I flipped to the back where blank pages waited for new observations. I wrote, Day 15 to 3 p.m. Large object in water. Approximate 200 m offshore. 15-20 m long. Dark. Angular. Surface briefly. Submerged heading north. Unknown species / classification. When I finished writing, I noticed other entries. Similar observations from previous keepers. Saw something large moving underwater near sunset. Dark shape parallel to shore, too big for sharks. Thing in the water watches the lighthouse during the afternoon. The entries went back decades. Different keepers. Different years. Same observations. That night the knocking was different. Louder. More insistent. And it didn't stop at 3 knocks. It continued. 4, 5, 6, 7 knocks spread across those 17 minutes. Like whatever made them was more aggressive, more persistent. I stayed in the kitchen, hands gripping my coffee mug, watching the clock. At 12:17 the knocking stopped. At 12:18 I opened the curtains. The windows were wetter than usual. More salt water. And the marks on the granite were deeper. Longer. Like whatever made them had stayed longer. Had pressed harder against the lighthouse trying to reach something inside. I called Margaret the next morning. She answered on the second ring. You saw it in the water, didn't you? She said. Not a question. A statement. How did you know? Because everyone does eventually. Usually around the 2-week mark. Once you've proven you'll follow the rules, it shows itself during daylight. Like it's acknowledging you. Letting you know it's there. She paused. And the knocking was different last night, wasn't it? More intense. Yes. 7 times instead of 3. That's the pattern. Once it shows itself during the day, the midnight visits become more aggressive. For a few weeks. Then they settle back to normal. It's testing you. Seeing if the increased activity will make you look. Make you open the curtains to see what's making the noise. A lot of keepers break during this phase. Can't handle not knowing. Can't resist the urge to look. What happens if you look? There was a long silence. The 2 keepers who went missing? Both looked. One in 1967. One in 1998. Both had family, friends, and lives. But after they looked at midnight, they changed. Became obsessed with the ocean. Would stand at the windows during the day staring at the water. Stopped sleeping. Stopped eating properly. Then one night they walked out to the rocks and didn't come back. Bodies never recovered. The Coast Guard searched for weeks both times. Nothing. Like the ocean took them. And the keeper who doesn't speak? Annette. She looked in 2011. Saw whatever's out there. Coming back from the experience changed. Traumatized. Wouldn't explain what she saw. Just stopped talking. Still does the work. Still follows the rules now. But whatever she witnessed that night, it broke something in her. She transferred to a different lighthouse 3 months later. Still keeps lights. Just can't be here anymore. I spent the rest of October following the rules while the midnight visits intensified. 7 knocks became 10. Then 12. The windows would be completely covered in salt water by 12:18. The marks on the granite became elaborate. Almost like patterns. Like something was writing or drawing on the rocks. But they'd be gone by morning. Washed away by waves or dissolved by something I couldn't explain. In early November I found the other rules. I'd been reading through the notebook more carefully, taking time to understand all the protocols previous keepers had documented. There were 5 major rules. The midnight one was just the first. Rule 2. Never go outside between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. The observation deck door must remain locked during this hour. If you hear your name called from outside during this time, ignore it. It's not a person. Rule 3. If you see lights moving underwater at night, do not signal them. Do not attempt communication. Continue your normal duties and log the observation without investigating. Rule 4. The foghorn is automated. If it sounds when there's no fog, go to the interior room without windows and wait. Do not try to shut it off. It will stop on its own after 17 minutes. Rule 5. Once per month, always during a new moon, something will climb the exterior of the lighthouse. You will hear it. You will feel the structure vibrate. Do not open any exterior doors. Do not look out the windows. Wait until sunrise. In the morning, there will be marks on the tower. Photograph them and add them to the archive. Each rule had dozens of entries from previous keepers. Observations, experiences, violations and consequences. The notebook was a century of documentation showing that these weren't random superstitions. They were protocols developed through trial and error, through keepers learning what was safe and what led to disappearances or psychological breaks or transfers. I followed all 5 rules exactly. In mid-November, I experienced Rule 2 for the first time. I was working late on equipment maintenance. 2:15 a.m. I heard it. My name. Claire. Clear. Distinct. Coming from outside. From the direction of the rocks. Not shouted. Just spoken. At normal volume but somehow audible over the wind and waves. Claire, can you help me? I froze. I looked at the door leading outside. It was locked per protocol. The voice came again. Claire, I'm hurt. I need help. It sounded desperate. Real. Like someone actually injured on the rocks. Every instinct told me to respond. To go help. But I remembered Rule 2. Never go outside between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. If you hear your name called, ignore it. I went to the interior room. No windows. Just storage and equipment. Sat there until 3:05 a.m. When I came out, I checked the security camera pointed at the rocks. Reviewed the footage from 2 to 3 o'clock. Nothing. No person. No injured visitor. Just waves and granite and darkness. But at 2:17, right when I heard my name clearly, the camera showed something. A shape. Not quite human. Not quite an animal. Standing on the rocks where the voice had come from. The camera couldn't focus on it properly. The image was distorted, but it was there. Standing. Looking at the lighthouse. Then at 3 o'clock exactly, it moved back into the water and disappeared. I added my experience to the notebook. Checked previous entries about Rule 2. I found dozens. I heard my wife's voice calling for help. Didn't respond. Checked the camera, saw shape on the rocks. Something called my name repeatedly, stayed inside. Correct decision. The voice knew details about my family, still didn't go out. In the morning found nothing on the rocks. Whatever called from outside between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. knew details. Personal information. Could mimic voices. But every keeper who'd responded to it had either disappeared or experienced something traumatic enough to make them leave immediately. In December, I experienced Rule 3. At 9:30 p.m. while doing evening checks, I saw lights in the water. Not boat lights. These were under the surface. Blue-green. Moving in patterns. Circular. Geometric. Beautiful and mesmerizing. They moved closer to shore. Then spread out. Then converged again. Like they were performing. Or communicating. My hand went to the light panel. I could signal back. Flash the lighthouse beam. Make contact. But Rule 3 was explicit. Do not signal them. Do not attempt communication. I logged the observation. Moved away from the windows. Continued my work. The light stayed visible for 40 minutes, then gradually dimmed and disappeared. In the morning, I checked the notebook, found dozens of entries about underwater lights, and 3 entries about keepers who'd signaled them. All 3 transferred within a week. All 3 requested emergency reassignment. One entry from 1979 said, "Signaled the lights." They responded. They came closer, surrounding the lighthouse. Whatever they are, they're intelligent. And they're not friendly. I can't stay here. I won't stay here. The keeper had left the next day. By January, the isolation was affecting me. 3 months of following rules I didn't fully understand. 3 months of hearing knocking at midnight and voices at 2 a.m. and seeing things in the water that shouldn't exist. I started having dreams. Same dream. Walking out to the rocks at midnight. Looking at the ocean. Seeing something looking back. Something large. Ancient. Patient. It doesn't move. Just watch. And in the dream I can't look away. Can't close my eyes. Just stand there while it studies me, learning me, understanding me. And I wake up knowing that if I ever actually looked, if I opened those curtains at midnight, I'd see exactly what's in the dream, and I'd never be the same. Margaret called weekly to check on me. "The isolation gets to everyone," she said during a January call. "Especially winter. You start questioning whether the rules are real. Whether you're overreacting. That's when people make mistakes. When they convince themselves it's not that serious. That one look won't hurt." "I'm not going to look," I said. "Good. Because Claire, I need you to understand something. This isn't folklore. It's not a maritime superstition. Whatever's out there, it's real. It's documented. And it's dangerous. The Coast Guard knows about it. They've investigated multiple times. They just don't have an explanation that fits their framework. So they maintain this lighthouse. They hire keepers. They make sure someone's here to maintain the light. But they also make sure new keepers are told about the protocols. Off the record. Through notebooks and handovers. Because they know that anyone working here needs to follow these rules, or they'll end up dead or traumatized or gone. Why not just automate the lighthouse? Remove the keeper entirely. They tried. In 2003, fully automated system. No keeper on site. Lasted 3 months. The equipment kept failing. The light would go out at midnight. The backup systems wouldn't engage. They'd send technicians. Everything would work fine during the day. But at night it would fail again. They finally realized. Something out there doesn't want the lighthouse unattended. I want someone here. Watching. Following the rules. Acknowledging its presence. So they brought back keepers. And the equipment failures stopped. In February I made a mistake. Not intentional. But a mistake nonetheless. I was exhausted. Working 16-hour days maintaining equipment during a series of winter storms. I fell asleep in the chair near the windows. Around 11:30 p.m. I woke up at 12:03 a.m. The curtains were still open. And before I fully understood where I was, I looked at the window. Just for a second. Just a glimpse before realizing what I'd done. I saw it. The thing from the ocean. Standing on the granite directly outside. Massive. Taller than the window. Shape was wrong. Proportions that didn't make sense. Limbs that bent in ways that violated biology. Skin that looked wet and reflective and completely black. But the worst part was its face. It had a face. Almost human. But stretched. Distorted. Like it was wearing a human face over something that wasn't human at all. And it was looking directly at me. Eyes that reflected the lighthouse beam. Intelligent eyes. Ancient eyes. Eyes that showed recognition. Like it knew I'd finally looked. Like it had been waiting for this moment. I tore my gaze away, slammed the curtains closed, stumbled backward. My heart was racing. Every part of me wanted to run, to leave the lighthouse, to get as far from that window as possible. But I remembered the protocols. I remembered what happened to the keepers who looked. I forced myself to stay calm, to go to the interior room, to wait until 12:18. When I finally opened the curtains again, it was gone. But the window was covered in something. Not just salt water. Something thicker, darker, like oil. And the granite showed marks. Deep grooves. Like it had been clawing at the foundation, trying to get inside. I called Margaret immediately. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You looked," she finally said. "You saw it." "Yes, for just a second. But I saw it. And now it knows you've seen it. That changes things, Claire. It knows you're aware of it now. Really aware. Not just following rules blindly. You've acknowledged it directly. That creates a connection. For the next few weeks, it'll be more active, more persistent, trying to see if you'll look again, trying to draw you out. You need to be extra careful. Follow the rules even more strictly. Don't give it any opportunity." She was right. The next 3 weeks were the most intense of my posting. The knocking became constant during the midnight window. Not just 3 or 7 or 12 times. Continuous. Pounding on windows and doors. The voice at 2 a.m. called my name dozens of times. Knew things about my family. About my childhood. About fears I'd never told anyone. The underwater lights appeared nightly, moving in patterns that seemed designed to attract attention. And the foghorn started sounding randomly, 3 times in 2 weeks when there was no fog. Each time, I went to the interior room and waited exactly 17 minutes. Each time it stopped precisely on schedule. By March, things had stabilized. The activity decreased to normal levels. The thing had tested me after I looked, and I'd passed by continuing to follow protocols. But something had changed. I could feel it watching now. During the day, during normal work. A constant presence just offshore. Just out of clear sight. Always there. Always aware of me. I experienced Rule 5 during the new moon in March. Around 3 a.m. I heard it. Something climbing the exterior of the lighthouse. The structure vibrated. I could hear scraping, scratching, the sound of something massive pulling itself up the concrete tower. It took about 20 minutes to reach the top. Then silence. Then sounds of it descending. By 4 a.m. it was done. I waited until sunrise like the rules said. Then I went outside with my camera. The marks were incredible. Running up the entire height of the lighthouse. Grooves in the concrete. Handprints, if you could call them that. Each print had too many fingers. Fingers that were too long. The marks were deep. Like whatever made them was incredibly strong. I photographed everything. Added the images to the archive. Found dozens of similar photos from previous new moons. Same marks. Same pattern. Dating back to 1923 when the first keeper had documented this rule. I looked at the oldest photo. From 1923. The marks were identical. Same size. Same pattern. Same number of fingers. Whatever climbed the lighthouse during new moons, it had been doing it for over a century. The lighthouse was built in 1914. Had it been climbing it since the first night? Was this its territory? Was the lighthouse an intrusion? Or was it something else? Something I couldn't understand? I called Margaret one last time. Asked the question that had been building for months. What is it? Really? What's in the ocean? What comes ashore at midnight? She was quiet for a long time. Nobody knows. Not really. The oldest Inuit stories from this region mention something. a guardian of the deep waters, something that predates human settlement, something that watched the coast long before Europeans arrived. When the lighthouse was built, the local Mi'kmaq warned the construction crew, said this was sacred ground, said something lived in the waters here, said not to disturb it. But the lighthouse was built anyway, and the first keeper started documenting the midnight visits within a week. So it's been here the whole time? Longer. Much longer. The lighthouse is just the most recent intrusion. But whatever it is, it's adapted. I learned to live with the structure. As long as keepers follow the protocols. As long as we don't look. Don't engage. Don't try to interact. It tolerates our presence. Tolerates the light. But the rules exist because early keepers learned what happens when you break them. When you look too closely. When you try to understand something that's fundamentally incomprehensible. I'm still at Peggy's Cove. Coming up on 2 years now. I followed the rules exactly since that one look in February. I've documented 43 new moon climbs. Logged hundreds of midnight knockings. Recorded dozens of instances of the 2 a.m. voice. Photographed countless underwater lights. And I've learned to live with it. I learned to accept that this lighthouse sits on the edge of something old. Something that was here before the granite cooled. Before the ocean filled these waters. Something that tolerates human presence as long as we respect the boundaries. The notebook is thicker now. My entries fill several pages. Observations. Experiences. Confirmations that the patterns continue. The protocols work. The rules exist for a reason. And that reason is outside every night at midnight. Whether I'm watching or not. Whether I acknowledge it or not. Whether I understand it or not. Sometimes during the day I see it in the water. Just beneath the surface. Moving parallel to shore. And I wonder what it looks like fully. What its true form is. What I'd see if I looked at midnight with no curtains closed. But I don't want to violate the rule. Because I saw its face once. I saw those ancient eyes looking back. And I know that some things aren't meant to be fully seen. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some entities are older and stranger than human understanding allows for. The lighthouse will stand here for decades more. Maybe a century. And every keeper who works here will learn the same lessons I learned. Will follow the same protocols. Will close the same curtains at midnight. Will hear the same knocking. Will see the same marks on the granite in the morning. Because this is how you work at Peggy's Cove. This is how you keep the light. This is how you survive on the edge of the Atlantic where something older than memory still comes ashore every single night. Margaret retired last month. The Coast Guard called me. Asked if I wanted to recommend a replacement for when I eventually leave. I told them about the notebook. About making sure the handover includes the protocols. About ensuring the new keeper understands that the rules aren't optional. They said they already knew. That every keeper at Peggy's Cove gets the same off-the-record briefing. Has for 100 years. Will continue for as long as the lighthouse stands. Because the thing in the ocean isn't going anywhere. It's been here longer than we have. Will be here longer than we will. And the lighthouse, despite being a human structure, despite representing navigation and safety and modern maritime technology, exists on its terms, on its territory, and we're only allowed to be here because previous keepers learned how to coexist, learned the protocols. I learned never to look at the sea at midnight, and learned that survival sometimes means accepting mysteries you'll never understand. Respecting boundaries you can't see, and following rules that exist because people before you died to teach you what not to do. The light still shines. Every night. Sweeping across the Atlantic. Warning ships away from the rocks. And at midnight something comes ashore. Knocks on the windows. Look for observers. Tests each keeper. And those of us who follow the rules survive. Those who don't, well, they become warnings, entries in the notebook, proof that the protocols matter, proof that the thing in the ocean is real, and proof that at Peggy's Cove, the light isn't the only thing watching the water. The ocean watches back, and it never stops, and it never forgets, and it never forgives keepers who look when they shouldn't, who sees what they're not meant to see, who cross boundaries that exist for reasons older than the lighthouse itself. So I keep the curtains closed at midnight. I stay inside between 2 and 3 a.m. I don't signal the underwater lights. I hide when the foghorn sounds without fog. I document the new moon climbs. And I survived. One day at a time. One night at a time. One midnight at a time. Following the rules. Respecting the protocols, never looking at the sea at midnight, because that's what keepers do here. That's what we've always done. And that's what we'll continue doing for as long as the lighthouse stands on these ancient rocks where something still lives, still watches, still comes ashore every night, whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we understand it or not. Whether we're brave enough to look or wise enough to keep our eyes closed.